I'm very excited to introduce Victor Riparbelli, co-founder and CEO of Synthesia, the world's leading AI video generation platform that makes video creation as easy as writing an email. Prior to founding Synthesia or co-founding Synthesia, Victor has been involved in technology entrepreneurship for about 10 years and has been involved in building products across many industries. I first met Victor in November 2018 when he shared his team's vision to empower anyone to create video content without cameras or studios. And as a professional photographer, I was a little alarmed, but excited by that, obviously. And fast forward to 2025, they're powering thousands of customers' videos every single day. Victor, welcome to our fireside chat. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Evan.
Where are you calling in from? Just for context, you saw in our chat, everybody's globally calling in from across Europe, United States, and Japan. Where are you these days?
I am in London in our HQ here. Just got back from the West Coast, though.
Well, you probably live on an airplane. So we're going to break up today's conversation about 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so into three categories, just so the audience knows kind of the past, the present, and the future. So after 10 years growing your domain expertise as a serial entrepreneur, tell the audience what sparked the idea to start Synthesia, and how did you and your co-founders come together?
So the story kind of, I guess, really begins in 2016 when, after having worked in the Danish startup ecosystem and done a bunch of smaller projects for myself, I moved to London. I knew I wanted to build a company. I knew I loved building products, but I also had learned that I wasn't super excited about building accounting programs and business process software. I love science fiction. I love kind of frontier technology, and I love, all the kind of creative arts. So I kind of wanted to do something that could combine those two things. So I spent a year or something like that working in London. This was just when VR and AR was the current thing. So I was involved in a lot of VR and AR projects, and kind of after a while realized, well, I think the tech's very cool. It just, the market wasn't there, right? And I think, looking back now, that's probably the right decision. But doing all that work, I met a lot of interesting people, among them Professor Matthias Niesner, who ended up becoming my co-founder, and he'd been an associate professor at Stanford, where he did a paper called Face to Face, which really was the first time the world saw these kind of technologies. And when I saw that paper, I just felt like I saw magic for the first time. It was very simple. When we look back at it today, it's not very impressive because the world's moved on. But really what it was a neural network producing photorealistic video, right? Actually in real time back then. And I think my mind just couldn't let it go. And I started formulating this thesis that, the first thing that's going to happen with these technologies as they get better and better is that the marginal cost of producing content is going to go to zero, right? Not just in dollars, but also in time and skill required. We've seen this before in text, of course, right? You can write a book from your bedroom. You can distribute a book from your bedroom. You don't actually need to ever leave your computer. In music, which is my big passion outside of work, right? Because we can sample, because we have virtual instruments, you can also recreate any song you want, more or less, from behind your MacBook, right? And it felt like that's going to come to video as well. And this is the technology that's going to unleash that, which is going to create a massive economic opportunity to build a company in, but also, I think, just democratize creativity, which was exciting to me. And then the second part of the thesis was that when we can actually code and program video, that will change video as a media format, right? And I think that's also slowly happening now. When we can program video, we don't have to make video something that's linear, something that's broadcast, where we all watch the same video, right? Like we do on YouTube or Netflix or whatever. Video is going to become interactive. It's going to become personalized. It's going to be something very different from what we know video being today. And I think the best way of thinking about that is, if you think about a physical newspaper and a website, right? In spirit, it's the same thing. It's a page of information. But obviously on a website, that can be updated in real time. You can't do that with a newspaper. You can have a comments field. You can't do that on a newspaper. You can, with one click, navigate to millions of pages, right? It can be personalized. There's so many things you can do in a website you can't do with a newspaper. And while it's still early, that's the way the world is going, right? And that's the kind of that's the opportunity we saw back then. And then to a long story.
So jumping in, Victor. Back then, though, I mean, that view is great. I mean, we believed in that view, but most people felt it was quite contrarian. I mean, so every single day, what percentage of people got it, or agreed with you, or said no, it'll never happen? I mean, this is one of the challenges of many startups in the early days. I mean, what was that feeling back then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was before generative AI really was working, right? So it was definitely kind of contrarian opinion, and most people didn't get it. I think, and I think with those things, right? Like, it wasn't very fun for the first 3 years. Well, it was fun, but
it was different kinds of fun. I mean, you had a lot of fun, but it was, frustrating. It was like most people were saying no or didn't believe you. Is that correct?
yeah, I mean, most people didn't believe, right? So we were waiting for the technologies to work, and hoping that they would work and become good enough to do something useful with them before we ran out of money. So it was like a fun time, but I think, obviously looking back now, I think maybe the timing was perfect, and we survived long enough to kind of, for the technology to start working and the world to kind of like get on board with the thesis. And yeah, it's been a fun ride since then.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about how you and Stefan kind of, reached out, inspired Mark Cuban to lead, what was, your first financing before we invested.
So basically, we had to raise some money, right? Building a company like this obviously is expensive, and so we went out, and I think I was 26 at the time, and Stefan was the same. And I mean, as you know, we didn't have impressive CVs. We hadn't been at Facebook or Uber or doing AI research for years, right? So I think a lot of people saw two guys with a crazy idea and a PowerPoint deck. And that's probably why we got turned down by, I mean, almost 100 investors or something like that. Nobody just got it, right? And honestly, I think to some degree, I can see why. We had this, long list of people that we thought could be interesting. Mark Cuban was one of them. He fit well kind of in the Venn diagram between people who understand media and technology at the same time. We tried to get in touch with him, and obviously you need an email address to do that, right? And so his email address is not like publicly known, but we know he was on Shark Tank. We know that Sony got hacked a few years earlier. So Stefan and my co-founder went in and downloaded all the emails that got leaked in that Sony hack. And in that hack, or in that dump, right, we also found his email. And then we sent him an email, and he responded within 5 minutes. And he has a Gmail address, believe it or not. And I remember just telling Stefan, like, there's no way this is real. You're taking the piss, right? It's like, no, it's actually real. And then on it back, and then we had a 10-hour long email conversation with him. We never spoke with him on the phone, never met him. He just asked us a bunch of questions, and he ended up investing. And I think the lesson there was that he had actually implemented face-to-face himself at home, right? We didn't have to convince him around the thesis that all this stuff that I mentioned before was going to happen at all. He was totally on board with that. He was just looking for a team to fund, right? And the issue was, with all the other investors we were talking to, we had to start at like, hey, this big thing's going to happen in the world. And obviously, if you were to invest, you'd first have to believe that, and you'd have to believe that you'd be the right team to do it. Whereas with Mark, it was more of a punt on, we can be the ones who can do something interesting in that space.
Cool. It's great hustle. I mean, around that period of time as well, or I guess just before or around the same time we met, you also had a big deal with a project for Beckham in multiple different languages. And that was kind of, tell the audience a little bit of like, what was the state of the product then? And then versus the state of the product kind of now. And then we'll get into the kind of present for the next phase of kind of transitioning from what it was then when we first met. And the Beckham was, I think, a bit after we announced or about roughly the same time. So give us the comparison of then and now.
Well, the first thing we tried to do was to build technology for video professionals, so agencies, production studios, Hollywood, etc. Right? There would be the obvious people to sell, AI video technology to. And so we built this AI dubbing solution, which was like, take a video that was recorded in, say, English and translate it into Spanish by putting a new voice over, and then animating the face to match the new voice track. This is before voice cloning really worked at scale. This is before these technologies were very stable, right? It only worked if you looked straight at the camera without looking to the side. There's so many constraints around this. And what we found out pretty quickly was that we did a few good campaigns, but it was very obvious that product would not scale, and the path there would have been to build a visual effects studio with the proprietary technology, and that could probably have been a decent business, but that was not like the ambition we set out with originally, right? And so what we did was say, okay, we've built this technology. What else can we use it for? And we just went around and spoke to hundreds, if not thousands, of people to try and build a first principles understanding of what is video, why do people make video, who's making video today, and why are they doing it, who's not making videos but would love to make videos. And especially that category we found more and more interesting, right? Because we met so many people who were very interested in making video, but they weren't today because they worked in a corporate job. They couldn't get budget from their boss. They didn't know how to use a camera themselves. They couldn't use editing software. And all these people were saying like, just give me some way to make video without having to use a camera, right? And when we looked at what these people really wanted, a lot of that was talking head style videos that led us on to this idea of avatars, which was obviously, creating just a video of a talking person is much easier than doing an entire Hollywood film, which consists of someone, fighting, someone flying an airplane. Like, it's a much more constrained domain. And so we built this technology where we could basically create these talking head avatar style videos. And the insight there was that for these people who were not making video, right? They were making text, they were making PDF documents and PowerPoints, and they really wanted to make video. So we only had to be better than a PDF document or a PowerPoint, right? We didn't have to be better than a real video. To work with the Hollywood studios, the production companies, we'd have to be better than a real video. The quality threshold there was much, much different. And I think that's how we, figure out that avatars was the right way of doing this. And essentially what it did was it unlocked all the world's PowerPoint users to become video creators. And since then, we built tons of stuff on top of it. But that's kind of
that's great.
Fun thing. Yeah.
Well, the context then to now. So let's jump to now and talk about the use cases for present. Talk a little bit about some of the huge companies and how are they using and benefiting from Synthesia today. So a couple of your favorite use cases.
So today we're the biggest AI video platform for the enterprise, and we essentially help PowerPoint creators become video creators. It's a full platform. We help you not just with creating the video, but with all the collaboration around it and the publishing. So create the video, edit it with our kind of PowerPoint style interface, collaborate with your colleagues, and then publish it using our proprietary video player, and but everything kind of connects together. And what we see a lot today with the current state of the tech is essentially kind of training use cases. Now, for a lot of people, training kind of means L&D. That's not the case at all. Training can be low value, like compliance. That's certainly a use case for us, but training also be very high value. Training your customers on how to use your product, training your customers on why your product is better than your competitors in a product marketing sense, customer support, like so all these different areas of business wide where you're relaying information or creating kind of how-to content. And that's where Synthesia comes in. It's very clear that today people want to watch and listen to content. They don't want to read that much anymore. And we provide a way for people to create content at the same speed and scale as they would with text or with PowerPoint, but with output as video, right? So some of my favorite use cases, Zoom uses Synthesia to train 1,000 salespeople all over the world. I think that one's really cool.
And how many languages do they do that? Do they do that in multiple languages? That's one of my friends runs a $1 billion business recently and said they just did into dozens and dozens of different languages to train their network of team members.
It works in 140 different languages. And the great thing about these videos is that they're kind of like a Word document, right? You can create it once and you can open it up. You can edit something in it. You can replace some, take a section out, add in a section. And that's the thing you can't do with real video, right? That's actually one of the surprising things to us, I think. We're very focused on like the front end of creating the content initially, as in like the cameras, all that stuff. That's a really annoying process, which of course it is. But what we found was that actually a lot of the frustrations comes after you've shot the content and someone didn't do their line properly, right? They said something that is wrong, or you changed the name of the products during the editing process, or like all those things are things you can easily solve for with use AI.
And then I guess we look forward, 5, 10 years, let's say 5 years, because 10 years is a long time. But what do you think are the next more really exciting industries or sectors that you think will start using more of Synthesia and other case studies for them?
Well, the big thing that's coming now, right, is that we're going to make these videos interactive and personalized and evolve video from being just, a broadcasting type of format. And so what increasingly will happen is that as a customer, you will interact with the products that you use through video interfaces, right? So if you have a problem, instead of going to a text-driven knowledge base, you will go to a video interface, or probably just in plain voice, you'll explain your problem. And these kind of video agents will then take in what you've said, and they'll explain, hey, Evan, this is why your bill for your electricity was higher this month than last month. This number went up, something else happened, etc. Right? So you can actually resolve those kind of things live on the call. It could also be you want to learn more about how a company works or product works, right? And you'll go into these interfaces that are more kind of conversational and personalized to you, as opposed to just watching kind of hard-baked videos. And that's going to take a while for the technology to really get there, but that's absolutely the way that this space is moving. And for us, that's exciting because that means that we can actually come in and become the mediator for many more of these touch points, right? When everything runs on our platform, also the actual video player, the interface that you use as a consumer to interact with the company, and that means we can build a much more cohesive experience around, essentially what is communication.
So, I mean, in regards to that, I think that's very exciting. But on the flip side as well, with the increased noise and increased discussion of, when you started, generative AI term wasn't really used, and now it is, and there's a lot of hype around the space. What keeps you up at night regarding the future, of AI, or what are you doing, now that you feel keeps you ahead or keeps you, delivering more value to the customers?
I think what we've always done well, if I have to say so myself, is being very focused on what we call utility over novelty, right? So AI is obviously driven a lot by splashy demos, exciting new cool things. Customers, both consumer level, but also in businesses, are very willing to part ways with their money to try out new AI things, and that's great. We want lots of experimentation, but it can also be kind of like a false signal, right? Because we've all seen the hype cycles. Like, I mean, when I started in VR AR back in 2016, right? Everyone was convinced that was going to be the future. The VC money were pouring in, people creating all sorts of things, but 3 years later, everyone tried out those things. We're like, actually, this is a pretty crappy experience, right? Like, this is like fun to try once, but I'm not going to want to do my work sitting with a VR headset on. And these are what I call kind of innovation potholes. And I think we've been good at avoiding those, which is essentially like, chasing like the latest fad, listening to a customer who says, oh, no, we definitely want like avatars in VR. I'll pay you $300,000 to do it. There, I think you really have to ask, like, why do you want this 5 times, and figure out when are people trying to solve a real problem, and when are they doing something they find interesting, but they haven't really kind of thought it through. And I think best way to think about that as a company today, right, is that the land has become a lot easier with AI because everything is flashy and interesting, and people will definitely try it out. But the real vote, right, is the renewal, right? So that's 12 months later if you're selling B2B software. If it's consumer software, it's a couple of months later how many people are churning. If your churn rate is like 30-40%, you may have created something cool, but maybe not something that's kind of enduring. So I think that's how we think about it. And the other part I would say is there's so much emphasis on the technology, right? We love talking about models. And I always say that, smart people talk about models, and customers talk about problems and workflows, right? And apps that
Right.
did. And so what we've done, we've built an entire platform and workflows around it. And a lot of that stuff is not as interesting as the AI things, right? It's kind of boring things that you need, but a lot of those small boring things together, they really work together to create a very kind of cohesive experience.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, the 2 key things there, I mean, focus and the platform on top of the brilliant tech. Tell us a little bit. I mean, as the company has grown and you've got more customers and more extensive platform, how do you remain that focused? How do you make those decisions? As you've evolved as a CEO of a growing company that is building and building more and more. I mean, that's something that could, as advice for other entrepreneurs, like, how do you iterate with yourself on this question of focus and what to do and what not to do?
I think you want to try and enforce like a really, really good bullshit filter in your company. People can talk about these things in different ways, but
Yeah.
if you work in tech, you're surrounded by bullshit all the time, right? Everyone is always killing it. These new products are always going to solve the next big thing. And there's a lot of great things about that, right? We want that in the industry. It's a great kind of foundation. But the issue is that most of it is bullshit, right? Most of the things people were saying 5-10 years ago did not turn out to be true. And so you have to really be good at finding signal in the noise. And when you are in these hype cycles, it can be difficult, and it can be easy to look at what your competitors are doing, right? They just raised $15 million, they're doing something, and you're kind of like, maybe I should be doing that as well. And sometimes you should be doing it, because that's the hard part. But a lot of times you probably shouldn't be doing it just because someone else is doing it. And I think that's one thing you culturally can try to enforce, right? On a more practical level, I think it's really just about focusing on utility, right? A lot of people in my space in AI video are trying to build for Hollywood, the cool things, let's make films. And I'm like, I'm totally for that. And it's definitely going to happen at some point. But the harsh truth is, none of this stuff is good enough yet. It's just not. It's getting there now, right? But the last 2 or 3 years, it's like 6 fingers. There's no controllability. They're the same actor twice. And so, yes, you can make fun music videos, you can make fun meme content and viral content. You'll definitely maybe even get to $20-30 million VRR. But the real acid test of AI video is like, when do people just create videos and don't tell people that it's AI generated, right? Because that's when you're actually doing it because it's useful, not because it's fun. So I just think you need to have a good BS filter. It's amazing. It's an amazing asset to a company to work with a technology that people find interested in and has its like magic capabilities. But it can also very easily lead you down paths where you end up, running in circles or in worst case, kind of like wasting your resources.
It makes a lot of sense. And I also remember in the earlier days after we started collaborating, sometimes you and Stefan would be up, most of the night responding to support, responding to actually the actual, nitty gritty part of it. That's probably where you learn what the customers really needed and what was the bullshit factor in the early days. And now obviously a bigger team, but I think that focus has really helped you guys succeed. One of the things, obviously, we'll get onto the future in a second. The transition recently, you guys raised a bunch of money from NEA, and you've got amazing investors. What have you learned through the process from each fundraise that you could kind of give as an advice to other entrepreneurs that are trying to do in the early days, to even just get started? I mean, later it might be, easier or harder depending on the cycle. But what is your advice after now becoming quite experienced in fundraising in order to build a business?
I think if you apply the BS filter again, right? 99.9% of VCs are lemmings that do what other people do and say. And that's okay. That's how the world works, right? It's a model that kind of works, but just be very realistic about that. And what that means is that outside of course, baseline building a great company with great fundamentals and a great vision and a great product, you in the fundraising process, you want to engineer urgency. You want to engineer that kind of lemming effect with VCs, right? That means trying to do your raises very quickly, very structured, and make sure that everyone kind of gets to an answer the same week. Don't fundraise over 3, 6, 7, 8 months. I think when we met you, I've been fundraising for 9 months and I've made every single mistake in the book.
We had a fun. I still remember that fun meeting, the first meeting we had, where you had, the passion. Obviously, you still have today, but that day, I think it was late in the day, and you're laughing already. I'll let you. From your perspective, how did that meeting go? What happened? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think we were very desperate at that point, right? So,
well, they're desperate. So you only went with Evan because of that, or no?
No, we love you. We still love you. No, I think we were frustrated, right? But we felt like we had something real, but no one really understood it. And I still speak very fast, but I think back then maybe I had like 10% more than what I have right now. And it was kind of fun. I remember you stopped me halfway through the meeting and you're like, Victor, can you just like try and slow down like 15% so I can hear what you're saying?
Yeah, but also so you could breathe. I was worried like you were just gonna like pass out, and then Stefan was leaning back in his chair and he almost fell off his chair laughing because I guess nobody had ever said that. I was fascinated, but I would just like I wanted to take it down a couple downshift a little bit. But okay, for the last 5 minutes or so of the chat, one of the questions I love asking is what do you think the best personality trait, best and least best personality traits are of an entrepreneur? However, you got to do it one-word answers. So in a one-word answer, what's the best and least personality trait of entrepreneurs? And then I'll ask you the same for investors.
The best and the least good. I mean, I would say the best is having a strong bullshit filter, as probably is evident in the last 10 minutes. Yes. I really think that's very, very important. I mean, I read like founders are way better than me. I think that's what they're very good at, seeing through the noise. The least good, I think, is probably the opposite, right? It's like jumping on bandwagons and just like always following whatever the consensus opinion is. If you're following consensus opinion, you're generally either too late or you're, making decisions based on, probably not like fully grounded data. It's rather that whatever is like the current consensus ends up being the right thing in the long term.
Okay, now it might be similar. I have a feeling. So for investors, what's the best personality trait and the least best personality trait in one word answer?
I think the best personality trait is to be highly sociable and likable, because ultimately, I think that's what that's one of the things I think matters a lot in terms of like winning deals. And I think the least good personality trait, I think it's being an asshole, because if you're an asshole, then reputation spreads really quickly, and you're gonna close off deals for yourself. So I think the social aspect of it is much undervalued. I think in many ways VCs is about winning deals, and then there's a few ones that are contrarian, and I think that ultimately is very driven by humans.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Who inspires you every day?
I get my inspiration from like lots of different places. We just hired.
Give us a couple examples. I mean, obviously it's a roller coaster, starting a business and building a business, and every stage is a different chapter. I mean, that's one thing when we have our regular calls and our breakfasts, in London, the main question I always like to ask is, okay, so, what's keeping you up at night? What's, how are you doing as a person? Because, people build businesses, and I think it's very important for people to have, find inspiration in different places. So where do you find yours?
I find a lot of mine in movies and sci-fi, and I think right now I'm so tired of reading about AI. Of course, I read about AI, right? But it's just, again, I think there's so much noise right now. And so actually what I think is very interesting to study right now is like, how did SaaS as a category, what did that look like, 10, 12, 13 years ago, right? Where everything was using on-prem software. You had these like first SaaS tools that kind of started working. What were the patterns of those companies that really kind of made it through? Because I think we are just we are again in a new era, right? It's a different type of software. And I think instead of looking at what other AI companies are doing, I just think it's more interesting to look at like, how did the great SaaS companies of 10, 12 years ago, what did they do really well? It's not the same, things change, but here there's less fog of war, right? Because all those funds have played out. You know who the winners are, you know who the losers are. Right now, there's so much noise, right? People raising money left and right and center and propping up the valuations and all sorts of random kind of things. So it's very difficult to find out like who's actually doing well and who's just like getting propped up or who's like just doing hype. So I find there's more lessons, especially when you're in such a hypey space. I think there's so many things that now is really the time to look at like, what is a good business, right? A good business is solving for our workflow. It's not about the technology itself. It's about, I think, a lot of the human connection, right? Meeting your customers, building deep relationships. Of course, all the models and AI stuff is great, but I think you learn much more by looking backwards in time of like, what is a great business right now? Whereas like 5 years ago, it was much more about the models, right? How can we get to something that's kind of working? What are the opportunities that's going to create? I think those are more obvious now. Now it's about actually building great enduring businesses. And there, I think you want to learn from the past more than you want to learn from like the present.
I tend to agree with you, and it's one of the reasons why I read a lot of biologies and books about successful people and people that have had challenging lives, and I think those are the ones that always help me try to evaluate and understand the future and opportunities to build valuable businesses. Transitioning a little bit, you had a fascinating TED Talk recently, which I got to get your autograph next time I speak with see you in person. But the topic was, will AI make us the last generation to read and write? And so tell us a little bit about, how is this possible? And what role will Synthesia have in that evolution?
I really managed to piss off a lot of people with that, which is exactly.
I love it. That's the goal. I mean, you got to be
fun, right? I was had to come up with a novel idea, and basically,
who did you piss off?
Huh?
We didn't talk about this. Who did you piss off? I mean, I can imagine, but tell us.
Oh, so many people, right? Because people like really don't want this to happen. They think it's a very bleak future, which I totally understand, right? And I'm also not saying that people will never be reading or writing again, right? I don't think that's the case. But I made it provocative, kind of on purpose to get reactions, right? And because I think that's always a great debate. But my thesis is pretty simple, actually. I think if you look at how people prefer to consume information today, it's video and audio. And especially if you go down to people who are like 18-year-olds today, younger than that, they want to listen and watch to all their content. And I think that that's a trend that's only going to continue. And my, kind of provocative statement there was that, what if at some point in time, we're not going to be reading and writing at all? We're just only going to be watching and listening. The way we're going to send messages to each other is not going to be by typing them out. We're going to record ourselves, use our avatars, whatever. And what I kind of try to address in that talk is that, of course, the thing that's going to enable this is that creating video and audio content becomes as easy as text, which it isn't today, but it will be very soon. And then the other thing I addressed was this, but there's this sort of interesting, I think, guilt thing associated with this. So I love reading myself, but I read less and less. When I want to learn about a new topic, I generally start on YouTube, and then I go to TikTok maybe. And I have this thing of like, I really should down and sit and read this book, right? 200 pages, sitting in my armchair, doing something that's good and intellectual rather than like swiping on my phone. And I don't have the answer to this, right? But I'm just like, why is that? A lot of books are overly dense. There's way too many pages. You can't write a book that's 30 pages long, even though it should have been 30 pages long, right? It's going to be 150 because that's what the publishers want.
And it's also not interactive. It's, you kind of have to do it's a linear story. I mean, it's a benefit of a linear story from the writer, but sometimes it's like when I get a newspaper randomly, I read it and I get bored because I can't interact and go to, hyperlink or go to different places.
I do. And so maybe, at one point we will look back at like reading and writing as just being an inferior way of communication, because also in text, right, there's so much information that goes lost, right? It's per definition, like the world around us is complex and meaningful and deep, and you can't really convey all that just in text. And just like hieroglyphs, cave paintings, whatever kind of technology we've had in the past aren't really a thing anymore today. Maybe we'll evolve into something different. And people think this is like very dystopian. I get why, but I think, I think ultimately, if we can do richer communication at the same scale and speed that we can today, I don't think it's going to impact people's ability to, share their ideas and I think it will make us all much more creative and interesting. But I mean, it's probably going to take a while before we get there, right?
I think you're absolutely right, but I agree with your view. And obviously we're biased here at LDV. For the last 12 and a half years, we've believed and continue to believe that visual tech and visual communication is going to kind of far surpass text communication. And so I think we're on the same page there. Which one visual tech do you hope exists in 20 years?
I mean, in 20 years, I think it's almost hard to imagine what's like not going to exist. I think current pace of innovation, I think it's we're going to have a lot of cool things. No, I think
I'll just say in whatever number of years, in the near future, whatever, 5, 10, 20 years, what excites you the most, or what visual tech doesn't exist today that you wish you had today? It maybe is aligned with the kind of TED Talk, about, learning or something.
I mean, as someone who loves like art and culture and film and music and so on, right? I think some technology that is immersive in the sense of like VR and AR, but it's actually like a great experience and it's a social experience, I think was really cool. I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas last week, and that's one of the best media experiences I've had in a very long time. I thought that was really, really cool, amazing experience. But obviously that requires like a $2.1 billion dome in Las Vegas, and I'm very not very fond of going to Las Vegas. But anything like that really makes you feel media in a different way, I think is very powerful. And for me, that was like that was a huge kind of aha moment. There's something there, right? A headset doesn't do the same thing yet. AR doesn't do the same thing yet. But I'm sure there will be like the way we go to concerts, or the way what maybe is like cinema today will be a very different immersive experience in the future. I really hope that's going to happen, because I think the ability for humans to like use our fantasy and take ourselves to new, exciting universes, I think is such a fundamental part of being human. And it's one of the parts of being shit that I enjoy the most. And
are you okay, Victor? What happened?
My computer fell down from my stand here, but I'm okay. I just got very excited about new media formats. But I really think that's gonna be that's gonna be something that's exciting. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, the last quick question, 1-sentence answer. This has been so much fun. We could keep on talking for hours, but we've got to go on to more great speakers. The last question is, in one sentence, what's that one advice? I mean, you talked about different advice throughout our session today, but in one advice for the like first time entrepreneurs who are just starting, what's the best advice that you could give them to help them succeed?
I think it's got to be, if most people believe in something, assume that it's wrong. That's not always the case. But especially if it's a new technology that's kind of breeding, right? I think for me, obviously, it's I also saw one of the commentary was like 90% of this tech is used for like bad things in porn. And I think that's something people have been saying for 5-6 years, right? And that's absolutely wrong, I think, from a numbers perspective, even though it has negative consequences. But I think you really have to have to zone out these kind of like dogmas that come from people just like believing things, or like not actually But this kind of I think most new technologies when they come out, they come with these kind of biases, right? People are afraid of them, they're scared of them, and for good reason. We should, of course, be very careful about the tech that we develop. But there's so much power in trying to see through that filter, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, really if you want to build a business, a venture scale business, you have to be able to see around corners, right? And that really requires to, again, kind of try and see through what's like dogmas, what's like first principle thinking, and so on. I think that's something you can train yourself to, right? If you're in a room with people where everyone agrees on something, maybe you want to challenge that when you get home and see if there's like different perspectives that are more interesting.
Fantastic advice, Victor. Really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your wisdom with the audience. It's an honor to partner with you. It's the whole team at Synthesia, very genuine and passionate and determined to create value. Hoping for continued success at Synthesia and anything that you do, Victor.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it.